Hello, my name is Seppo Puusa for acneeinstein.com, and in this video I want to talk about vitamin D and more specifically about vitamin D for acne. And I want to answer questions like whether you should take vitamin D supplements and whether vitamin D can be helpful for acne, and if so, how much you should take vitamin D and what are some good sources for vitamin D. So let's start by looking at how vitamin D might be helpful in acne. And one area where it might help is insulin resistance. And in case you don't know, insulin resistance means that when you eat carbohydrates, they are digested into sugar or glucose and then go into your bloodstream. And it's the hormone insulin that then takes glucose from bloodstream and escorts it into the cells. And in the case of insulin resistance, this process is hampered a little bit, and the insulin doesn't work so effectively. And as a result, your blood sugar metabolism go too high, and this puts hormonal acne into sort of overdrive. It causes a hormonal cascade that increases sebum production and skin cell growth, and basically your skin becomes very oily and it's just a huge mess. So anything that can help with insulin resistance might be helpful in acne. So there are observational studies that show that people with low levels of vitamin D, blood levels of vitamin D, generally have more severe insulin resistance than those with higher levels of vitamin D. Now, these are observational studies, and we cannot really conclude from these that yes, vitamin D is helpful in insulin resistance. For that, we need to look at clinical trials where they actually give people vitamin D supplements and then look at what happens to their insulin resistance. And there are a few of those. For example, in the Tufts Medical Center in New England, they took 314 over 65-year-old adults and gave them 700 international units of vitamin D for 3 years, and then they looked at what happened. And when you look at that, all those 314 people as a one group, there was no effect on vitamin D. Basically, before and after the study, the insulin resistance levels and the blood sugar levels were the same, so no effect. But when you drill a bit deeper and you look at the group that started the study as being insulin resistant, so these are people who, at the beginning of the study, already had some issues with their blood sugar metabolism. So when you look at those people as a group, we can see that the vitamin D had a protective effect. So looking at this insulin-resistant group and comparing those who got vitamin D to those who got a placebo supplement, these who got the vitamin D, these people actually remained stable. Their insulin resistance didn't get any worse or any better, so they remained stable. Whereas these people who got the placebo, their insulin resistance got worse and worse and worse as time passed. So this study shows that there may be a protective effect from vitamin D in insulin resistance. And then there was another study of South Asian women, mostly Indians, who live in New Zealand, and they took and these people were with vitamin D deficient and insulin resistant already at the beginning of the study, and they gave those people 4,000 international units of vitamin D for 6 months and looked at what happened. And these were actually pretty good results. The insulin levels dropped by 20 to 30%, depending on how much, depending on the blood levels of vitamin D. I mean, dropped against the baseline from where they started. And when you then compare those who were treated with vitamin D to those who got the placebo, there you also see benefit that those who got vitamin D had improvements in insulin resistance, levels, blood sugar levels and inflammation as compared to placebo. So that study also shows that there's a good reason to believe that vitamin D might be helpful in insulin resistance and diabetes. Now, to be honest and trying to keep this as unbiased and as possible, there are a lot more studies, some positive, some negative. And because the results from these clinical trials are still quite ambiguous, it's kind of hard to draw really good conclusions on whether whether vitamin D is helpful in insulin resistance or not. We cannot say for sure, but looking at all the studies, I think we can conclude that there's a good reason to believe that those who are already insulin resistant or have some other problems with the blood sugar metabolism, for those people, vitamin D might be helpful. I would say it's probably at least worth a shot. Whereas those people who have healthy blood sugar metabolism, don't have high insulin levels or blood sugar levels, for those people, yeah, don't bother. Vitamin D is probably not going to do you any good. So that's insulin resistance. But there are also some other reasons why vitamin D might be helpful in acne. For example, it's been now shown that skin cells have receptors for vitamin D, and that vitamin D affects how the skin cells work. Like if you look at the sebum producing cells, for example, in test tube studies they've shown that as you increase the concentrations of vitamin D, the growth of these sebum producing cells slows and it goes down. And the fewer of these sebum producing cells you have, the less sebum your skin produces. Now we have to keep in mind that this is a test tube study, and what happens in a petri dish might not be the same as what happens in a living human. So it's an interesting possibility, but we can't really say for sure yet because there are no studies done on living humans. And then there's and it's been also shown that vitamin D affects the rate of growth for many skin cells. And this is also important for acne, because acne is not only a problem of excess sebum production, but it's also a problem of excess skin cell growth. And when the skin cells grow too fast, there are too many dead skin cells to eliminate, so your skin pores get clogged, especially when mixed with a lot of sticky sebum. So, and this is a similar case with psoriasis and some other skin conditions. And it's been shown that vitamin D does regulate the growth of skin cells. And at least one study in psoriasis patients showed that synthetic vitamin D cream actually helped with psoriasis. It reduced the psoriasis index and severity because it reduced the rate of skin cell growth. So that's one other possibility of how vitamin D could help with acne. Now, as I said, these are mostly from test tube studies, and that one human study with psoriasis patients, so conclusions are a bit iffy, but I would say that if you happen to find a vitamin D cream, I think it's worth a shot. They're not going to cost that much, and there are really no adverse effects, so it's worth a shot.